We are going to take the first few minutes to give people time to log in and join our meeting. Thank you all for being here. If you could make sure that the name on your screen matches the name that you registered for today's quarterly meeting with, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And we always love to see friendly faces. So if you wouldn't mind having your camera on, we that. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Carmina. I'm going to give us another couple of minutes before we get started. So for those of you that just entered, if you can make sure that the name on your screen matches the name that you registered for today's meeting with, that would be helpful. All right. Good morning and welcome. I'm going to give it one more minute, you guys. All right. Welcome and good morning, everyone, to the January the 1st of 2025's quarterly meetings for Riverside County Suicide Prevention Coalition. My name is Diana Gutierrez. I am the Prevention and Early Intervention Manager here with Riverside University Health Systems Behavioral Health Department. I also serve as a co-chair for your Riverside County Suicide Prevention Coalition. And I'm going to get us kicked off for our first meeting of the year. I can get my clicker to work. There we go. So I want to give you a little bit of background about the coalition, but before we do that, oh, I think I poll. Give me 1 second. Let's do a quick poll. Okay, are you guys seeing a poll? Not yet. I hit launch, but I'll tell you, my internet's been a little bit wonky this morning, so perhaps we were going to skip the poll and just give people a few more seconds to come in, and I'll just tell you a little bit. Oh yeah, something's wrong with my Zoom. It just said it failed to launch the poll. We know that. Zoom, thank you for telling us. I'm just going to go ahead and give you some background, then we'll skip the poll today. Oh wait, did you see a poll now? Okay. Okay. Never mind. We're going to do a poll. Real quick and simple. We just want to know from. And so here at Behavioral Health, we break our county up into three parts, Western, Mid, and Desert. And so if you can let us know whereabouts you provide service or where you sort of represent from, that would be great. Western region is like Corona to about Moreno Valley. Mid-County is everything Paris down south, all through that 215 corridor down to Temecula. And then our desert region starts in Banning Beaumont area all the way out to the Arizona border. So if you those areas, let us know, or countywide. And then we also would love to know who you serve in terms of their age population, and then what best describes your work setting. Here at the coalition, we do believe that everyone has a role to play in suicide prevention, so we want to have representation from across as many sectors as possible. And so we always like to take a look at this and have all of you as our community and membership see who's here and who's missing. And if they're missing, how do we get them here? And then we thought, for a fun way of us getting to know each other a little bit, what is a strength or characteristic that gets you through hard days? One of your strengths, your own characteristic that helps you get through hard days. So we've got about 62% of you have participated in the poll so far. Let's see if we can get 90% of us answering this poll. We're at 71. Awesome.
Mhm.
We're almost there, guys. 78%. Let's get a few more of you answering this poll, and then we'll share results. 81%. I need a couple more people. I'm going to give 10 seconds, and then we're going to close the poll. All right. 81% is pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and see who's here with us. I think Zoom is slow today. Maybe perhaps it's the wind. Okay, can everybody see the results? Yes, okay, perfect. So we've got some representation all across the county. That's wonderful. It's actually about an even distribution, as well as a large number of you serving the entire county. So that's terrific, because the work of the coalition is countywide. So we need all of you here from across the whole county. So we're really glad to see it, as well as really great representation across all of our age populations as well. And then we've got behavioral health staff, other county staff, schools in the house. Awesome. Community-based organizations, some law enforcement, military. Of course, we're glad to have you here today, as well as some others. So you see those blank spots? We need representation from all these areas. If you have a contact, you have somebody who says at the end of the day, you say, wow, they really should have been here. The work that they do matters, in terms of this work that we're doing here. Connect them to us so we can get to know them and get them an invitation for future meetings. Okay, so what is a strength or characteristic that gets you through hard days? Let's see. Can you guys see this screen with the answers? Annie, are you able to see this? No? Um, what are you seeing? The PowerPoint? No?
On my end, it shows me the poll, but like the back end of the poll.
Yeah, so you're seeing question number 4 with the answers?
I don't see the answers though.
So strength or characteristic, I'm just going to read some of them. Watching the bits, the passion to serve the underserved and vulnerable, my wonderful coworkers, practicing gratitude, dancing in place to carry a grateful heart. Oh, I like that one. Using positive affirmations, resourcefulness, family and faith, writing poetry, humor, faith, humor, passion to help others, being hopeful, mindfulness, a faith, hope, charity, team support, sense of humor. Fantastic. Um, Thank you all so much for that. Hold on. I have tech issues. Let me get this screen up again. Okay, that's great. So those are good things to keep in mind, as you hit a hard day, right? We just want to remind ourselves that we've got some of those internal strengths and characteristics already that help us get through that. So just a really great reminder. So a little background. Your coalition, Riverside County Suicide Prevention Coalition, is led partnership between public health and behavioral health. Rebecca Antillon is my co-chair that helps us do this work on the public health side of the house. She's not able to be here with us today, but we are representing on her behalf. We have a really great agenda for you today. We're excited. So we're gonna do a little overview of the coalition. Then we have Brianna Green with us here today to talk with us about an integrated approach to veteran care, addressing mental and social needs of our veterans. We will then have a panel discussion and Q&A and closing announcements. We'll let you know what's coming next. So as a coalition, we believe that suicide is often preventable with the right knowledge and skills, and that everyone plays a role in suicide prevention, regardless of their background or experience, which is why we want as many folks here with us each quarter and a part of our subcommittees that represent cross-sector. This isn't just a behavioral health or a social service issue. This is a community issue. It's a human people issue. And so we need all the humans and the people to be a part of it with us. In order to do that and eliminate suicide deaths and suicide attempts in Riverside County, increase those resources and supports, that's why we need people across all the sectors. So this is an overview of the 8 subcommittees that we currently have working to bring the strategic plan, Building Hope and Resiliency, to life here in Riverside County. Each of these subcommittees represent an area of that strategic plan that goes across the suicidal crisis path, hoping to address all the issues that we've identified here in Riverside as it's based on data. So you can see we've got great partnerships with leaders, not only from county organizations, but from education, both K through 12 and higher ed, as well as community-based organizations that are helping us do this work. And is my slide not working? Oh, there we go. This is what we like to call the Cliff Notes version of our entire strategic plan. You can find the full strategic plan, Building Hope and Resiliency, on our website at rivcospc.org. And then this is this one-page overview. So as you can see here, we built it along the suicidal crisis path, which is looking from upstream, where the folks in this area are really talking about how to build connections, build resiliency, increase positive coping, so that we can try to address the environment people are living in so that they don't even consider suicide as an option when they're struggling. And all the way through prevention, we have tons of trainings. We'll tell you more about those a little bit later. We have our engaging schools. This is K through 12, looking at standardizing policies and procedures on how suicide is addressed across the entire suicidal crisis path on the campuses throughout our county. Higher education is doing the same for our college and university campuses. Our intervention subcommittee is looking at care transitions, increasing and standardizing the care that individuals with suicidal ideation and attempts receive in our county, how we connect them to ongoing supports. And then they also have a strong focus on reducing access to lethal means. Our postvention subcommittee is looking after a suicide has occurred. Those that have been impacted by that loss are now at risk themselves. So what resources do we have in place for those individuals that have been impacted by loss? And they've been doing a ton of work in postvention. We've got 2 brand new initiatives in place that just happened right in the last month. Clinical bereavement counseling is available. We have 17 trained clinicians throughout our county that are trained now to deliver 8 sessions for individuals who are currently grieving a suicide loss. That resource can be accessed on the TIP website or the Trauma Intervention Program's website. And then we also just trained 23 community members to become facilitators of peer support groups for loss survivors, suicide loss survivors. And so those groups we're hoping to launch in the next couple of months, and excited to bring that new resource. Our effective messaging subcommittee is looking at how we talk about suicide, because we know that vulnerable individuals can be put at increased risk when we're not careful about how we talk about suicide. And then our Measuring and Sharing Outcomes Subcommittee, who we always affectionately call the Data Subcommittee, they do everything data, and they're making sure they helped us create the plan based upon the data in Riverside County and are continually looking and assessing that data as we move forward. So that was just a little bit about our coalition. Like I said, you can find out so much more on our website at rivcospc.org. So I'd encourage you to check it out. But at this time, I do want to welcome the main reason why you all joined us today, which is our presenter for this quarterly meeting. Brianna Green is the Community Engagement and Partnerships Coordinator for the VA VISN Desert Pacific Healthcare Network. With over 12 years of experience in mental health, she's passionate about addressing the challenges faced by individuals and families impacted by mental health conditions, domestic violence, and dementia. Brianna holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Forensic Psychology from Arizona State University. In her role, she's dedicated to fostering strong community partnerships and implementing innovative strategies to improve mental health outcomes for veterans. Please join me in welcoming Brianna.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys? All right, let me share my PowerPoints. So I am Brianna Green, the Community Engagement Partnership Coordinator for Suicide Prevention. So our program is one of the public health approach that the VA is doing. But today we are here to talk about what an integrated approach to veteran care by addressing mental health and social needs of our veterans, and why we need to work together. This picture that I've chosen for my PowerPoint was purposeful because we all together are boots on the ground when it comes to interacting with our veterans, our service members in active duty, as well as their family, because they can't do any of this alone. They're actually a unit. We'll talk about what a veteran is, what it means, what's the legal definition, what it means to be a veteran from their perspective, why we are having veteran suicides. Let's talk about the facts, unfortunate data, some of the contributing factors. We'll have a panel discussion with my colleagues, Alex Trillo. He is also part of the Desert Pacific Vision Healthcare, but he is over the Long Beach healthcare system, as well as my other colleague, Raymond Espinoza. He is part of our VA Loma Linda section, and they are also veterans. And then we'll come back together so that we can talk about leveraging our community partnerships, as well as understanding what the Compact Act is, because I know that it's a very new law and not too many people understand what it is and how we can use that to prevent veteran suicides and all of the resources that I have available. Okay. So, who's a veteran? When you think of a veteran, is this the gentleman that may automatically pop up in your mind? Someone who is our older population, usually Korean War or our Vietnam veterans. When we do have Veterans Day or veteran focused events, or even our healthcare system, do you have this gentleman in mind? Or do you have our friends who are younger in mind that may look like this young lady? Or what about Joe Cardona? He was active duty and also played for the New England Patriots as a long snapper. What about our gentleman who is Special Forces? And we have Miss USA 2024, Second Lieutenant Alma Cooper. Not everyone is G.I. Joe. Not everyone feels deserving to call themselves veterans. We have to understand who the veteran sees in themselves when they take off that uniform, and respect that sometimes that they're not going to have their memorabilia on. They're not going to wear their hats. But Technically, the legal definition of a veteran is someone who served in active duty military, in naval or air service, and was discharged or released honorably. You can be other than honorable, but dishonorable discharge, unfortunately, is not acknowledged as a veteran. But if we negate that and take away those ideas or the legal definition, because that definition falls under receiving and qualifying for some of your VA benefits, your healthcare benefits, your compensation benefits, but it doesn't negate the fact that they wore a uniform. Or what about our veterans who are our reservists and guards? We often forget that they too are veterans. Unfortunately, they have to be activated into a combat mission or disabled or injured or aggravated injury to be qualified as a veteran to receive their VA benefits. And I want you guys to understand that just because you don't qualify for the VA benefits, it doesn't negate that you qualify anywhere else. As a as someone who works around veterans often, most often you need a DD 214. That's what the focal point is. Do you have your DD 214? And on that DD 214, does it show your service discharge? That's a lot how a lot of veterans wear their identity. It's based on their service discharge. Service discharges are what you receive upon entering civilian life. It can be an honorable discharge, general discharge, or OTH, which means other than honorable. An honorable discharge means you did everything great. When you separated voluntarily or involuntarily, your quality of service was acceptable and your conduct met performance standards. So you receive all of your benefits in your care. Your general discharge, you had some good qualities, but you weren't consistent. So you may have not met every merit that it deems for honorable discharge. And an other than honorable designation. Unfortunately, that's assigned to members whose quality of service didn't regularly meet standards. And that's often due to issues with conduct. And when you have an OTH, that can impact your eligibility for your VA healthcare and receiving benefits through your state and federal laws. As well as we know those who were dishonorably discharged or court-martialed, they don't receive anything. They, unfortunately. However, they still are veterans because they wore the uniform. They still have acknowledgement to themselves because they do have a DD 214. It's just they are not receiving benefits. And if we're only focused on veterans who receive benefits, then we're negating all of the experiences of others. And we know that veterans who received as discharged from service that's not characterized as honorable do have a higher suicide rate than those who have an honorably discharged. Our other than honorable designation, from ages 18 to 34, they're more likely than their other discharged peers to have higher levels of mental health and substance use problems. So again, understanding who a veteran is provides you a little insight on how you can take care of them in the healthcare setting, take care of them in your familial setting, take care of them in employment setting. But we know suicide is preventable, right? Diana said it, and everyone has a role to play in suicide prevention. And I want to let you guys know when people do have thoughts of suicide, they do seek some sort of help. But suicide can be impulsive. Sometimes a crisis hits, especially for our veterans. If you're 18 to 34 and your whole plan of life was to have a career here in the military in service, and then you were voluntarily separated or involuntarily separated due to medical discharge, that crisis hits and you impulsively act without even thinking. Our veterans aren't exempt from this impulse, but we know that it's preventable by making sure that we are getting help, encouraging help seeking behavior, listening to a veteran more than we're talking. Often I say, if you've ever attended a training of mine when we come to knowing the signs of suicide, I often say be a duck when it comes to talking to a veteran. A duck is usually the animal on the surface, it's gliding nice and smooth. On the inside or underneath surface, its feet are moving very fast. That's what is necessary to ensure that you get the veteran the care that they need. That's why we need you to ask, are you a veteran? Have you served in the U.S. Armed Forces? Because their unique challenges, their unique exposures to life can assist in increasing the support and prevention of suicide. We know that suicide is a complex issue. There's no single cause, and many factors contribute to it, like the COVID-19 pandemic, rising inflation. All of those are why we have seen an increase. And unfortunately, suicide continues to remain prominent for our veteran population, especially those who are not enrolled in veteran health care. Two-thirds of our veterans who die by suicide did not receive any care at the VA hospital or use their benefits prior to their deaths. And unfortunately, 18 to 34 has the highest in 2022 of suicides. They're a population that is often overlooked. When I had the discussion before of what is a veteran or who is a veteran to you, did 18 to 34 even populate in your mind? Did you understand, or do you understand that perception that you have, the box that you put them in, doesn't give them the safety that they need to ask for help, even when they're transitioning? Here in Riverside County, for over the last 4 years, 2018 to 2022, we had 234 deaths by suicide. 16% of all suicide rates, and over 50% of them were 18 to 34. As you can see, suicide is not exclusive to veterans or the military community. However, suicide has remained consistent with the veteran population. We have increases in different age brackets. However, from 2001 to 2022, it's consistent. Why is that? What are we missing here? Are we not understanding the unique challenges? Are we not addressing the mental needs and characteristics? I can tell you that there are some military specific risk factors that if you're not asking a veteran or you're not caring, if you're not culturally competent in military culture, you don't understand. Because we know veterans experience suicidal ideation before joining the military, and they also experience one or more traumatic events in their youth, which is referred to adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. We often forget as a society that these individuals were plucked out of different communities within the United States. They're impoverished at times prior to joining the military. Sometimes joining the military is their escape. They were bullied in school, so they believe if they join the military, they won't be bullied. But that's not always the case. You come into the military, you might exacerbate those feelings, those thoughts, and those activities. Your environment that you dealt with comes along with you. That's why we experience different thought process when we come to engaging with our veterans. We know veterans who completed fewer than 4 years of service prior to separation, they have a greater risk for suicidal ideation and behavior. And that's because a lot of veterans, when they sign up, They have plans to re-enlist. They have plans to extend their contract, but life gets in the way and they're unable to. When they're deployed, do you understand that you're separated from your family? You have to understand operation. You have to get with the tempo. And then we're supposed to allow you to come back into society. But what have you seen? If your whole life, if you enlisted at 18, maybe you've never used a gun. Now you've been taught this high powered killing machine. That has something to do with your psyche. Then it's difficult to reintegrate into civilian life. A lot of veterans do suffer from moral injury. If you don't know the definition, moral injury is the lasting psychological, biological, spiritual, behavioral, and social impact of perpetrating, failing to prevent, or bearing witness to acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs. And sometimes that expectation isn't just their own betrayal of self, it's watching someone else betray. A lot of us have this idea that when someone is deployed or goes into a combat zone, that increases their risk for suicide automatically. And I'm here to let you know that not always. It's actually the transgressions that happen that increases the risk for suicide. You, again, may have never shot a gun. Now you're shooting a gun. Now you're having to aim at people that you've never thought. Now you have to come with your own feelings about what is going on. But in the military, it's mission first. You're focused on the mission and you don't have that space to confide about your mental health. You don't have that opportunity to talk to someone because you do fear that you will lose your job. Then we transition into the military, transition out of the military. I apologize. I often tell people when you're in the military, it's your own little world. You are told where you need to go, you're told what to dress like, there's sick bays, and then once you voluntarily separate or involuntary separate, you're plugged back into a society that is way different than when you last left it. If you join the military at 18 and you're getting out at 23 or 24, you're going to be a lot different. Your life experience will be a lot different than those of the average 23 or 24-year-old who's here in the community. You're not going to be able to hold some of the conversations because you've seen a lot different. Your maturity level is a lot different because you had to take on leadership roles at a very young age. And again, you're molded to be a person who's mission first between 18 to 34. Then you come out, it's time to do a new life. Are we often the best unit in transitioning veterans? No. I'm here to tell you no. Most people treat their transitioned service member as furniture. You already have a developed routine without them. And then you don't reintegrate them back into your actual routine. You kind of tell them the routine, tell them what you need to do or what you want them to do, but you don't take the steps to truly reconnect in a familial sense, in a friendship sense, a community sense. You, as a healthcare provider, you're not engaging or learning or educating yourself on military transitions. You're not screening them for toxic exposure. Your assumption is that, oh, they'll get out and they'll receive VA care or they'll go to the VA. That's who will take care of them. But that's not everybody's plight. Not everyone is eligible for VA care. That's why there's a higher rate of suicides, especially in the first 3 months of someone transitioning. Also, our reservists and National Guards, they're often overlooked when we discuss veterans. and that's what increases their risk factors. Think about it. They're constantly having to reintegrate and adapt to their familial and employment setting while also processing their missions. There's a lot of reservists, especially here in our Riverside County. I don't know if you've ever gone to some of these hospitals. I know at RUHS main campus, there's multiple reservists that are providers, doctors, nurses. Are we talking to them, understanding how they feel, learning their plight? 9 times out of 10, we're not. We're not understanding that their work here with us in our civil employments, be just, they may be our ED doctor, right? But then when they go into their mission, they might be working for the morgue. They might have to get bodies for a living, or they might have to look in as an intelligence officer. And then they come back, and what we want them to do? Just go back into their role as if they didn't have this unique experience. And then at times they fear to inform leadership about their mental health conditions and what they're doing because, again, they fear losing their job. Also, some of our reservists and National Guard members, they understand to receive their VA benefits, they have to stay in longer than their active duty counterparts or be activated to a high stress level area, deployed into a combat zone. That's a lot. It's a lot mentally that they're suffering, and they suffer in silence most of the time. Or they find someone who's also on their team, but there only can be so much. They may not be providing you the coping skills that's necessary. We think about a lot of our 18 to 34-year-olds, their coping skill is to ignore, unfortunately, use of alcohol, to indulge in risky behavior when they transition or when they're still active because they can't tell someone how they're feeling. They can't express to anyone what is going on in their mind. And not only, again, are they having to deal with what their mission and operation, their MOS is, their work is in service. But as a unit and part of the family, they still have to deal with their parents. They still have to do if they have spouses, wife, husband, if they have children. And if they're consistently dealing with other issues and characteristics outside of their uniform, when they're putting on their uniform, they're trying to refocus back to the task at hand because they have to keep themselves alive as well as their next person. Societal perceptions and the unique challenges of veterans. Unfortunately, we as society have boxed veterans, as I said before. Our societal perception of veterans encompasses the collective attitudes, beliefs, and opinions held by society regarding individuals who have served in the military. These perceptions are shaped by various factors, including historical context and personal experience. That's why when I asked who is a veteran, it's because of our societal perception, right? When you logged on to understand the addressing of mental needs and social needs, did you have the 18 to 34-year-old population in mind? Or did you have our older generation, our senior generation? Did you have them looking in a certain way? We have to understand how we put our perceptions and box our veterans and our active duty. They're distrusting of getting help. They don't want to seek care with us. And if we're always pushing them to the VA can't do it by themselves. They do need our help. Some of the stereotypes that we lead with when it comes to interacting with veterans is all of them have PTSD or TBI, or that many veterans are homeless or struggling with addiction, or that all veterans see combat. That's not true at all. There are a lot more veterans who do not see combat. And see, if we only want to focus on combat veterans, those who suffer from PTSD, then we're missing populations that still need our help. Implicit biases, as well as the intersectionality of ACEs, especially in the healthcare field, often lead to veteran suicidal ideation and behavior. That lack of awareness, as I discussed earlier, and understanding about veteran experiences causes the issue for when you do transition from active duty until civilian life. When you have the employment fairs, when you are creating your employment fair or trying to get a veteran to attend an employment fair, the employers that are going, because of the boxes that we've already placed on our veterans, we're always putting them with law enforcement, security. Oh, we make sure that the Amazon warehouse is available to attend, but they're more than that. Understanding that it hurts to know that a lot of civilian jobs don't even acknowledge their certifications that they receive in service. You have leadership qualities that are negated. What about having the top prospects come to your employment fair? Why do we assume that when they transition out of service, they should take whatever they deserve? They should take whatever they can get. No one wants, when they were in service, they can have a sergeant, staff sergeant, corporal, an officer. And then unfortunately, when you do come into civilian life, none of those actually really matters to us in a sense when it comes to employment, but it matters to them. It does matter to them, and it matters in the respect of the position that you give them. That causes economic hardship because I don't want to take this job. I'm going to keep bouncing from job to job because this isn't what I want. This isn't what speaks to me. I'm used to carrying somebody over my shoulders. I'm used to having the coordinates. I'm used to making sure that the people back home still have the freedoms that they want and need. And one major issue with the prevalence of these stereotypes is often we portray veterans either as heroes or broken individuals. And it seems like there's no in between. But there is an in between. There is a gray area. There are a lot of veterans who aren't necessarily broken, but maybe they don't view themselves as the hero. Talking to them, understanding where they are mentally. Are we screening them? Yes, a lot of our veterans do suffer from depression, but depression doesn't look like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. You're not always sad. Sometimes your depression has you looking like Tigger, bouncing around because you're so concerned about everyone else that so you don't have to concern yourself with your feelings, your thoughts. And if we keep putting them in a box of you're either the hero or you're broken, that oversimplifies the realities of veterans. And us as civilians lack awareness of these complexities, which surrounds their issues with their mental health, with unemployment, as well as social reintegration. Because if I think you are the hero and I only say thank you for your service at a military appreciation parade or on September 11th or Memorial Day, that doesn't help me in my day-to-day life, which causes that gap and increases the gap of understanding and leading to stigmatization, which further isolates veterans from the community support. Instead of automatically assuming the needs of veterans that are in front of you, ask them what support looks like and their needs. With that said, I want to talk about more of the unique challenges that our veterans do face when they come home, and to provide a more engaging view and lived experiences to assist in your understanding to address and integrate the mental and social needs of our veterans in the community. We'll have a panel discussion with Alex Trujillo and Raymond Espinoza. You guys ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, like we talked about before, what are the difficulties of transitioning from military to civilian life? What was your relationship strain, if any? Did you have an identity crisis? Um, how did it feel with job loss? Did you view the VA to connect for service as a younger veteran?
Well, I know for me, the answer to all of those is yes. I joined right out of high school. And when I got out of the military at 22, almost 23 years old, uh, it was definitely a wake up call. I was used to being told what to do, when to be where, what to wear, like you had said. And so, uh, yeah, it was definitely a big change. I had just gotten back from an extended deployment, just gotten married, and then got out of the military, all three at the same time. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I honestly, uh, when it came to getting services at the VA, it didn't cross my mind. It was one of those things where I just assumed the VA was for, um, people that got really hurt during service, or for like the image that you showed at the beginning, for my grandpa. I didn't think that it was necessary for somebody like me who was still young and had some aches and pains and didn't know it at the time, but some um, PTSD symptoms as well. But I didn't look at it as being for me at that time.
All right. I mean, I can go ahead and share my experience with that. And it is kind of like that, right? Looking back at it now, the transition period is difficult because, at least at the time, you know, the Marine Corps offered two tracks, to exit, and it was either the employment track or, using your educational benefits, which, I wasn't really aware what was going on with that. So then I was like, well, I'm just gotta get back to work, right? Like my bills still have to get paid. So I took the employment track, but then once I got out, I was in a classroom, right? And then you start engaging with different veterans. You try to find your way in the world. You communicate with other people, different career paths. I think one of the things that is always assumed is like, oh, you served in the military, you can go be a law enforcement officer. And then it's like, but wait, if you go to the VA and you get, a diagnosis of PTSD or something like that might affect your, not just your career field in that field, but like potentially other things. So then you hold back and you kind of, you struggle to find yourself. Like there's a lot of misinformation, and it makes the transition that much more difficult.
I understand. Um, did you recognize yourself as a veteran when you first got out? Did you call yourself a veteran? Did you wear all of your memorabilia to have that recognition? How important was it to self identify from your perspective? Were stereotypes included in the way you felt when it comes to identifying yourself as a veteran? Was it important to you when you transitioned?
For me, it wasn't. Like I said, I went straight from high school into the military, so it kind of felt like independence in a way. Um, I was very fortunate in the time that I got out that, and it's still this way, but especially back in 2008, very patriotic, and a ton of support from the community. But to me, I almost wanted to. I didn't seek out to let people know that I was a veteran. Somehow they still identified on their own that I was a veteran, probably the haircut. But I know for me, I didn't really try to seek it out, and I wasn't ashamed of my service in any way, but I definitely didn't try to get people to acknowledge it. Um, but like I said, during that time, I mean, it was a very patriotic time, and people would certainly find out and seek me out at times, which is a little bit of a strange feeling.
Right. I think for me on the opposite side, I think that I was, kind of searching for that recognition. And maybe it's because, in the Marine Corps, you take a lot of pride and ownership for the things that you do. Um, I was 22, 23 when I got out. I was a sergeant of Marines, 2 weeks before I was in this remedial college classroom, right? And, that's the thing that, like, once you have like a little bit of rank, you're in charge of certain things in the military, right? There you got some responsibilities. You get treated a little different, right? Like they look to you to be the one to have the answers for things. It's a huge responsibility, especially looking back at it at 22 years old, right? But now I'm in a classroom and the professor is looking at me like I'm like the rest of the other students that with no life experience, kind of like young and dumb, right? For lack of better words. And yeah, for me, it was kind of important for people to know, like, hey, like, I served, so then we would wear like the backpacks with the Molly, to the gas cans, the Oakley classes, the gas cans, those are the ones everybody bought fresh out of boot camp. And you do certain things, the mannerisms, the language, right, to try to kind of put yourself in a different light. Even once I gained employment, right, my first job out of the military, which took me a year to get, was at Home Depot, and it was an entry level position, obviously. But the Marine in me was like, oh, like let me identify what's wrong. What can I do better here? How to improve these processes? And then I handed that to my supervisor, and it was like, bro, just go stock up the shelves. Like you're doing too much. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I was really confused, right? So for me, it was one of those things that I needed to identify like that. Because even then, like I think that, even my interactions with law enforcement were different. I've gotten pulled over, in uniform, and it was like, oh, well, where are you going? I was like, well, I'm going to base. I'm actually late, whatever the case may be. Like, all right, what, drive safe, you can just slow down a little bit, And then it went to being just me, and it was, no military affiliation. And I said, hey, man, do you mind if we search your car? I'm like, what? For what? Like, what do you mean? You know? So then I ended up putting a sticker of a sergeant rank insignia on my car in the windshield so that at least when the officer pulled up, like, oh, like the conversation would start like, hey, like, are you a veteran? And so, yeah, so for me, it was very important to identify as a veteran.
So you were treated differently outside of your uniform versus inside of your uniform when you transition. And I'm sure that it was hard to deal with. What role did support and empowerment play in your transition? Like support of your family or your friends or community, college, other veteran support, or your employment?
So I was pretty fortunate. As I mentioned, I got married right when I got out of the military, and I had my wife there. She was very supportive of me. She kind of helped me make that transition into civilian life. But then there was also a lot of things that she just didn't understand. A lot of things I didn't share with her, or even know how to share with her. A lot of things I didn't know I should share with her. So I did have support to a certain extent, but at the same time, she didn't understand what I was going through, what it took for me to hold things together sometimes, especially from a mental standpoint. Um, and for me, a big challenge was like, what do I share with her? Like, what will she even understand if I share? Um, and and so I feel that she helped me tremendously in that I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol or reckless behavior. So she kind of helped keep me in line there for sure. Um, but it also kind of made me feel like I had to keep this stuff inside, and I couldn't share because she wouldn't understand. And so, it kind of covered both ends for me. The support was there, but I also wasn't too sure how to use that support beyond just the basics.
Right. See, for me, like I think that the support that I leaned into was other veterans, right? That they were my friends before we all enlisted, right? And they had gotten out, ahead of me. Um, and I kind of relied on them to kind of teach me, right? But it was like the blind leading the blind because they weren't aware of any resources in the community. Um, they were drinking to cope, so I started drinking to cope. And literally, like it was the blind leading the blind. I think that looking back at my journey through academia and transitioning, from, active duty back to the civilian population, like there's so many instances where I could have used the community resource or like the VA or something had I known that that existed. But, because I was in that umbrella of, you know, um, just ignorance, like I didn't tap into any of those resources. And, for me, like, opposite to Raymond, I was actually coming out of a divorce. So I really didn't have like a spouse or anything to help me there. And my parents, being, um, unaware of the resources, like they weren't able to help me either. So I think that's one of the things that I would change in that situation is, spreading more awareness to that population because, we really are in a ball of ignorance. A lot of misconceptions of the VA, community providers, and like it's like mental health, right? The most common thing is like, oh, like if you go talk to mental health, they're just gonna put you on pills, and that's gonna be that, But it's actually not like that, right? Not everybody gets medication. You get therapy. There's different options that you can explore, right? And again, like even now, like that's still the misconception now because I through my work now, I still engage with some of these colleges, right? And um, my goal is to kind of teach them like, hey, like it's not right, and it's building that rapport with them because for whatever reason, years later, like the perception is still the same. Like, don't go to the VA, don't go to this and that because they're not your friends. They're here to, hurt you and impede you rather than see you be successful.
Well, since you brought up mental health and how there was barriers to seeking help regarding, could you talk to me a little bit about that? Like what stigma was associated with seeking mental health or misconceptions? What role did access to care play when it came to your mental health? I know in service you're not going to talk about your mental health, but once you left that life, what did that look like for you personally?
The challenge with mental health is that if you break your leg, if you have something physical, you can see it, and there's a pretty clear indicator of what you need to do to get help, or if you even need to do anything. The challenge with mental health is you don't get that, and so that's where sharing with others comes in, but it can be hard. Do you share with friends, you know, uh, around a dinner table or a campfire, and or do you seek out help? And so for me, uh, my kind of eye-opening moment was once the dust had settled of me getting out of the military, getting married, getting a civilian job, all of that. Once all the dust had settled, my wife and I were having a lot of problems. And I remember one time we were having a fight, and she was airing her grievances against me and things that had her upset. And it was kind of like she was reading off of a PTSD pamphlet, when she was telling everything about her issues with me. And that was eye opening for me. That's when I had realized, like, okay, I should probably do something about this. But just like Alex had mentioned, I wasn't sure how to go about getting those services. So I started off doing things kind of backwards. And the first thing that I did was I applied for PTSD as a service connected condition, not really realizing that that was literally just like the benefits side of things. And my evaluation went terrible, like absolutely terrible. It was so bad that it motivated me to engage in services. So, as strange as it sounds, that it was a terrible experience that helped me to engage in mental health services. That's exactly what happened. My examiner, I don't remember all the details, but I do remember her telling me things like, I don't have it as bad as other people because I didn't have to move to the mountains and stop talking to people. I don't jump under a desk anytime I hear a loud noise. And as far as the nightmares, just try not to think about it. And it was such a bad experience for me that it motivated me to go back and get services. And that's how the process started for me. It was a little bit backwards, but I'm fortunate and I'm happy that it was that it went as bad as it did, because that's what led me to getting additional services.
Now, see, with that for me, I think a lot of it was still, that I was drinking the Kool-Aid still of the Marine Corps, where, you don't go to a sick call, you push through because that's what Marines do. You figure it out. And honestly, I think, again, not having the knowledge of, the programs that I was in, so I was using, the GI Bill, and they were like, hey, like if you don't pass your classes, you're gonna have to pay all this money back. And at that time, I didn't have that kind of money to pay, for a whole semester worth of classes and stuff like that. So then, um, I think my fear of, you know, being stuck in that situation, where like I had to, like I felt like I couldn't slow down because the VA was pressuring me on the education side, like, hey, like we're paying for this, we expect you to perform, and that was it. Like I was just in my mind, I was expected to perform. Plus, it gets a little hard to have that conversation with somebody, even if they are a veteran, right? Because you don't know their experiences, and it's like, hey, like, I'm having these nightmares at night. Like, how do you start that conversation? Because some of the nightmares, at least for me, like they get pretty dark. And, you definitely don't want to have that with like a civilian, someone that doesn't have that experience, because that's already like a lot, and then people that served, they might look at you a little weird. And, it's just kind of hard to initiate that conversation. Then you go to the VA, and it is complicated to kind of get those services started, because, they have same day mental health, they have this and that, then you got to wait for an appointment. And, I think at the end of the day, like you prioritize, the mission, and essentially the mission's changed, right? So the mission is for you to be successful in life and, do that. And so these things are going to hinder that. So then you choose to go away from them. Um, so yeah, so mental health is definitely one of those, areas where it's not, really shown for what it is, right? How beneficial it can be. And again, like, one bad behavior leads to another until you finally, you hit a bottom point, right? A rock bottom, what they call it. And, once you hit that, then you're like, oh man, then you get your services and you're like, oh man, I wasted all this time, struggling for no reason.
And like you said, your experience was different than others. Your nightmares are to your nightmares by themselves. And if you have a provider, especially our community providers or our comp and pen providers, if they truly don't have the understanding that what a nightmare looks like to you or what trauma looks like to you, you can't successfully and adequately provide service, to be honest. This is about you guys, but I did have a Marine in my life who suffered, but didn't say anything. So I didn't know until one time I was asleep, and now I am not asleep because I'm in the air being held due to their dreams and them not wanting, and me having to provoke, hey, you need to go get help because this isn't okay. So family support is necessary. Um, did access to care play a role at all in you guys' choices not getting mental health support right away? Meaning, oh, I tried to get an appointment with a doctor and there wasn't one for a few months. So I just said, forget it. Don't worry about it. I'll seek time by myself.
So once I started engaging with the VA, I actually had a pretty good experience. I was able to get appointments in a timely manner, found a provider that I connected with really well. So fortunately for me, that wasn't a barrier. I came from a relatively rural area, so I think part of it could have just been population and the fact that there wasn't a very large veteran population where I was from. But yeah, so for me in my case, fortunately, access wasn't an issue at all once I went the right way about going about getting the services.
For me, I would say that I initially engaged with the VA, and it was like a 2 or 3 week period before you know um I engaged with a provider, and that was weird within itself, right? Because I decided to reach out to them, because of what I was experiencing. But they were kind of more focused on like the stuff that like my childhood, right? Like that's the first thing we touched on. And it's like, listen, like that's not what's keeping me up at night. Like you know, I mean, not every I didn't have like the most troubling childhood, but I didn't have the best one either. Like I understand that, but like there's things that happen in my service that are really affecting me right now. And if she was kind of like, oh yeah, eventually we'll get to that, and just seemed very dismissive. Um, and then it was like, okay, like so you're done with your first session. We can do another one. It's gonna be like 2 weeks out, and so then it became kind of like this yo-yo effect, right? Where like I was good, I was bad, I was good, I was bad, and like unfortunately for whatever reason, like my appointments were in the weeks that I was good, you know. So it was one of those things like I really couldn't express how I was feeling at the time. Like I had, now I make sure that I write things down. Right now I have a journal that, those are things that I learned, through the years, right? So now I can go back to the specific day, be like, oh, this day I was feeling like this. We can talk about that. But back then, I wasn't aware that, we could do these things. So um, access I wouldn't say was a barrier, but I think just the inconvenience of like, you know, those appointments coming, over extended period of time, right? And I didn't know that there was community providers that could do those things for us, help us out with that, So that's another one of those things. Had I known that, I probably would have chosen, to just be seen in the community because I didn't care who helped me get better. I just wanted to get better, and it just didn't seem like me and the VA were on, meshing at that moment.
I understand. We understand that trauma and traumatic experience on mental health and how that contributes to suicidal ideation. But what does trauma look like for you? How do you define PTSD? We know that, again, we talked about the societal perception that everyone thinks that once you in service, you got PTSD from combat or deployment, but that's not everyone's thing, right? So, what was your experience like? Did you experience any kind of trauma while in the armed forces or prior to the armed forces, and the armed forces exasperated any of that?
Um, so for me, um, I did have a tour of combat, and so I did see, and I was a part of a lot of things that were traumatic experiences. Um, excuse me, but oddly enough, I think one of the most lasting things for me, and and when I think of PTSD, I think my my idea of it, or my thoughts of it, is that experiencing a traumatic event, whether it's firsthand, or maybe you weren't there, right? And I think for a lot of veterans, sometimes the issue isn't something that you experienced firsthand, but something that you weren't able to be there for. And like I said, even though I was deployed and I was involved in plenty of traumatic situations, for me, one of the longest lasting, and the things that hits me most, is what I wasn't there for. I most of my friends, most of the people that I had enlisted with, went through basic training with, got ready for a deployment and deployed with. Most of them ended up re-enlisting when we were deployed. And I was on the fence. I was very close to it, but I had just gotten engaged at that time with the plan of getting married when the deployment was over. So even though everyone else was, I decided, what, I'm going to hold off. I want to get out and get married and be a civilian. And the deployment directly after that one that my unit was a part of ended up being a really bad deployment for them. That was one where lots of things happened. It was a new environment for them, and lots of them went through traumatic events that as strange as it may sound, like, I'm obviously, nobody wants to be involved in life and death situations like that, but at the same time, it's really hard to not be there with those that you had served with for so long. So all the things that I was a part of firsthand, yes, a lot of them leave a lasting impact, but still to this day, one of the hardest things for me was just not being there with those that I was close with, that had to go through traumatic events. So the reason I say that is because I know a lot of times veterans will have the mindset. I've talked to lots of veterans that were like, "Oh, well, I didn't see this, or I didn't do this," and I always tell them, like, that doesn't mean that you don't have PTSD. It doesn't mean that you don't have lasting trauma from something. Just because you didn't have this specific combat experience, you don't even need combat experience to have PTSD. So that's the thing that I always try to keep in the forefront of my mind, as well as be able to share with other veterans alike.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. With that, definition of what PTSD is. It doesn't have to be having from combat. I think it's honestly just a response to a high stressful situation where you're essentially confused and just trying to act right. And I keep this true to myself to this day. Right? They always say that you default to your level lowest of training in high stress situations. Um, so that I think that's kind of why I still do a lot of repetition stuff now that I think about it. Um, but yeah, some events can happen in garrison. You don't have to be forward deployed, and it's how I think it's like the what ifs, right? Like like what could have been done better. Like I think that's what really is what eats you alive, right? Like in my situation, we had an incident at the schoolhouse. There was a track that sank, and had we acted differently, I think that we wouldn't have lost the Marine that day. Um, but again, like I think those are, looking back at it now, like those were definitely out of my control. Um, but essentially, I think what still kind of like, I wouldn't say haunts me, right? But just when I reflect on it, it's like that feeling of being like of not knowing what to do. Like I think we all train, to a high level, right? Especially in the military, and then when something happens, like it all goes out the door. Like like your mind becomes a blank canvas. Like literally, like you forget everything, and a lot of it is repetition. You're like, oh, okay, like I gotta do this. I remember we had to do like CPR and some of the young Marines, and it was like it was one of those things where it's like, oh, You got to give so many compressions to so many breaths, right? Um, but memory recalls me, serves me right. It was just like, like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, but more explicitly, right? And everything from there became a blur. Um, so yeah, so we get placed in those situations and we don't think about how they're gonna affect us later. Now, it's one of those things where if someone isn't like, I have this. I mean, it's not weird. I mean, it's kind of weird, but I have this thing where like I have to make sure that like people are breathing when they're sleeping, right? It happens with my girlfriend, my daughter, my son. I remember one time, I was coming out of the restroom. My son had been, he was like 3 months old, and I just kind of peeked over at him, to make sure that he was compressing, right, he was breathing, right, and I remember that he wasn't at that moment, right, he was like, I didn't see that, so then my immediate thing was like, all right, pull him out of the bassinet, start working on him, and he started crying right away. My girlfriend runs in, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, like, he's not freaking breathing. He's like, he's crying. Of course he's breathing. And it's just like one of those situations, high tense. And then, it's like, oh man, like, it's part of that experience, like not knowing what to do and like trying to do better the next time that opportunity, that situation comes around. Um, but yeah, so again, with that being said, PTSD can happen in all kinds of scenarios, and it's something that I don't think we ever really fully overcome. We just learn how to manage and how to be better about it.
Do you think debriefing after that traumatic training experience or right the deployment, do you think that would have helped any with overcoming or readjusting, dealing with it?
Yeah, for sure. I think something that makes a big difference is processing, and that could look different for different people. Sometimes it's literally just talking about it, and so you know I think that just having an opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody can make a big difference, and that can kind of take it from being something that your mind can't get past, to it can still be traumatic, but the more you understand, typically the less that it's going to come back um, and I don't want to say haunt you, but to a certain extent, I think that's the case. So yeah, I mean, I think 100% debrief, talking about it, sharing your experiences is very important when it comes to traumatic events. Um, it's just sometimes finding that platform, or the setting to do that in is where the real challenge comes in.
No, yeah, I agree. I think debriefing on the situations, what happened, right, really helps out. I think also what kind of gives you closure, right, is like seeing things change, things being improved, learning from those mistakes so that things don't happen in the future. Which isn't always the case, right? Because in the military, you have an expectation to complete your mission at all costs, right? And um, sometimes some of the vehicles we were operating, they weren't, to their full capacity. Like, parts weren't available. Different things in different scenarios, and you do as best as you can. But having someone to talk to, or just like I guess the whole everybody that was involved kind of debriefing kind of thing, the after action report um, would kind of help you out a lot, because again, if you don't have the answers to those questions, right, then the what ifs are so many that you kind of lose yourself in them.
How do you feel community providers can assist with the unique challenges that you deal with transitioning back into civilian life, mental health, trauma and PTSD, your identity, um, to assist veterans that are an increased risk factor for suicidal ideation, so that we can decrease that? How do you guys feel the community can assist with that?
I think for me, I would say the biggest thing is it's okay if you don't have similar backgrounds or experiences. It's okay if you're not a veteran. Just show that you care. It's easy to pick up on if a provider cares or if they're just there because it's their job. And I think that's one of the best ways that you can make a connection with somebody. Um, the Sometimes you will get from veterans the statement that's something to the effect of if you don't know what I've been through, so how can you help? And honestly, that's one of my pet peeves. I really dislike that statement because in my mindset is I don't care if you've been through what I've been through or if you know what I've been through. I care that you care, because I'm confident that with a provider that cares and has the skills, that you can help me. And so, there is a time and place for everything, and there is a time and place where it is nice to talk to somebody that has a similar background. But ultimately, from a provider, I think if I were to talk to a community provider that may be working with veterans, the biggest thing I would say is just show that you care. Show that you want to help, and that don't fake anything, because again, it's easy to tell if you're faking something. Um, just show that you care, and I think it's as simple as that. Be consistent. Know that you're probably going to get tested early on. Some veterans um, want to test to see that you care, so they might try that in some ways. And so just being consistent, being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, goes a long way. um, and so that's, I would say in a nutshell, that's probably the advice that I would give.
No, yeah, I hear you, and I think that those are great points, right? I think building that rapport and that trust, between the provider and the veteran, really goes a long way. Um, and two things that I want to touch on. I think one of them is being, that most of us as providers, right? We deal with situations on a daily basis, right? And then we sometimes become a little bit desensitized to someone's experience because like, oh, we've seen this one before, and maybe the last person that we helped out with these things was just faking the fun. So then I think kind of embracing that every, although our experiences might be similar as veterans, like we all have a different story, like they're all going to be pretty similar because of the military background. But honestly, just give every veteran that you serve, anybody that you serve, actually really you know the leniency that their situation is different. Like even though you might have experienced something, similar as a provider before, like this experience is probably going to be different. And then the second one is, build that rapport with us. And, I think that, and I know, and I can say this from experience, because when I started, employment, I was working with veterans who were experiencing homelessness. And, don't overpromise anything, and have an honest, fluid communication with them as far as, what your program limitations are, what you can and can't do. Because, the veterans will hold you to the fire for like, oh, this person said they could do this or this and that, right? But if again, we are veterans. Like we understand that things happen. That's the number one thing that we learn in the military, right? You think you're, coming home on a certain day and your deployment gets extended, right? Or, you're had leave planned, but now you can't go because you got to do these things, right? You were supposed to be here at 10, but something happened and now it's delayed till 1400. Again, like we have those experiences. We're okay with that. We'll work through it. But just from a provider standpoint, I think just building that rapport and that transparency will really go a long way.
Speaking of programs, both of you guys are in two different programs and opposite spectrums. Could we talk about your programs that you are a part of under the VA umbrella, and what specific challenges our younger veterans have with either mistrust, lack of awareness, or accessing the services that your programs do provide. Especially you, Ray. I know you work as vocational development specialist, specifically with our unhoused, so veterans.
Yeah, so yeah, I work with employment services, specifically in the housing program. So the majority of the veterans that we work with are either currently homeless or were homeless and are now receiving housing services. Um, and so I think for me, um, a lot of the veterans that I come across, again, it's that transition. It's going from the military where you're told what to do, when to do it, to you have to be somewhat motivated to find employment. Sometimes I'll have veterans come in that want employment services, but they still want that military experience. They want me to say, okay, well, you're going to do this, you're going to do this and this, and then come back and talk to me tomorrow. And that's not always what they get um, when working with me. So, I do my best to just kind of uh, modify my approach depending on who it is that I'm working with. My specific position is called the Community Employment Coordinator. So I'm not so much a veteran facing as I am a community facing, in that I try to work with different employers and resources throughout the community to have available for my colleagues that do work more face to face with veterans. Um, and so networking is a big part of my job, and trying to find resources and employers that want to work directly with veterans, um, which can always be a little bit of a challenge when I factor in, the fact that a lot of what I just shared, that I am a veteran and that I do have certain mental health struggles. And so sometimes it can make networking, it can make interacting with other people more challenging. So, that being said, we serve all of Riverside and San Bernardino counties. So if you know of any resources, employment resources, education, training resources, anything like that, feel free to reach out. You can actually go to the VA's website and search Community Employment Coordinator and by region, and my information will pop up. So I'd love to be able to better serve the veterans in the community and in the area that we work by doing so. I went on a bit of a tangent there. Brianna, did I leave something out?
No. Well, do you have issues getting like our younger veterans that look like us, to interact and receive help with employment services, um, or is it okay? Are they more comfortable, especially when they see you?
A lot of times, the younger veterans, the 18 to 34 year olds, tend to be a lot more motivated. So they tend to be the easier population to work with for us. For the most part, it's usually the older population that has been homeless for quite some time, been unemployed for quite some time, that really kind of struggles to get back into the uh, employment world. So for the most part, 18 to 34, if I have somebody that age coming into the office, they're usually pretty motivated, willing to take on new skills, learn new things. Whereas sometimes the older generation tends to be a little bit more stuck in their ways, and this is what I know how to do. Help me find something where I can do this specifically. So that, of course, is a bit of a generalization, but that tends to be the effect. That tends to be the trends that we have in working with veterans.
Alex, can you talk a little bit more about how the VRC peer supports were prudent in your transition, and how that was helpful for you, especially with your mental health struggles, and why that's necessary uh, for our 18 to 34-year-old population to engage with, and why that, and the program that you're part of as well?
Right. So in my role here at the VA, again, I'm one of the community engagement partnership coordinators. And, we do work with some of the, well, most of the VRCs here in Orange County with the partnership with the Outside the Wire Coalition. And, I think having experience, being a student, you know, at one time, and kind of what I wish I had known at the time, it really helps us connect to the veterans now, right? And we look at the Veterans Resource Centers, right? And there's plenty of research and that has been done how, it's beneficial for a veteran who is in academia to have the support, system, to get them through. There's higher success rates, of those organizations. So then, you know, um, I think also what happens is sometimes, some of the VRCs are very protective of their students. So then, they're very, you know, mindful of who they let on their campus, right? Because again, I think in that transition stage, right, for any veteran, like they're easily impressionable. So if you have someone that's, come in and is going to promise, XYZ, then, like, but that's not really how it works. They just, sell you a good story, then, it could really impact those, transitioning veterans. Um, so I think that, bringing a balance to that and kind of seeing that, again, be stating what the programs can and can't do for these veterans, right? And having them access to, the knowledge of what's out there in the community really helps out. So that transparency point is really key for us, and including, the service members and their families, right? Because, that's sometimes a barrier that, presents itself when engaging, right? So, we learned that, sometimes veterans might want to go to an event or do something, to engage with other, fellow veterans to continue to build that camaraderie. But, they got to watch their kids or, their spouse, doesn't, is kind of feeling left out. So then incorporating them into the activities, then we know that we're likely to see a higher turnout, and still be able to engage not only the veterans, but maybe the spouses who again are going to be the family members. They're going to be they're going to be the first ones to see, there's something that, the veteran might be struggling with that they need help with, right? And they are the front line. So then, we got to make sure that they're well equipped, with the knowledge to kind of know what to do in situations. And, I think, before I was in this role, I was a peer support specialist with the HUD-VASH program in Orange County. Um, and sharing my story, with the veterans, I think that it's important, that they understood that, they were getting my honest experience as far as like, being, seeking mental health and, being on medication if that was a thing, like what was my experience, right? And, letting them know that, because, they do a Columbia suicide screening, like they're not trying to place you in L1, right? Just because, you are having suicidal ideations, you're not going to get put on medication, right? Just, having that, that rapport with them that, hey, like this is, what could happen. This is, how it happened to me. And like, let's get you that help. So I think, just being, again, having that transparency, letting them know that, not every veteran who is, in need of mental health is going to get put on medication, right? So yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind with that. But again, it's all very important that we keep, the transparency with the veterans because again, they can see if you're not being genuine and, might as well not promise nothing that, isn't going to be, true to them, right? So, just give them an honest opinion perspective, right? And then they on their own, through their journey will figure out if it worked out for them or not.
Thank you, guys. I want to thank you guys for this panel, this conversation that we had with one another. It actually leads me to the next part of the PowerPoint is how we work together, how we network together, how we leverage each other's partnerships so that we can educate and disseminate information so that we can lower those risks of suicidal ideation and behaviors within our veteran population. So how do we leverage community partnerships? What does that look like for you? When you think about veteran community resources and partnerships, where do you see an opportunity for collaboration? Again, I'm part of the VA's public health approach to suicide prevention. This involves engaging with other federal agencies, public and private partnerships, to ensure that we can reduce veteran suicide. Working with RUHS and the Suicide Prevention Intervention Subcommittee, we were able to promote secure firearm storage with gun locks, the cable locks that you put through the trigger, so it provides that time and space. Building those sustainable collaborations, making sure that there are peer support groups. They don't all have to be at the VA, right? Access to care. You can create a peer support group within your public library, or I have one on Zoom. These are things that we can work together, ensuring that our fellow veterans are engaged at every point of their life. Because again, Ray and Alex are some of the veterans that we have access to, and they gave you their plight and their unique challenges to address their mental and social needs. We don't have to use a blanketed statement for all of our veterans or generalize them. However, I will say their experiences, while unique, a lot of veterans in our area do have these same experiences, and they might need that support. I want to talk about, again, my position, community-based is Community Engagement Partnership Program. It's part of the VA's community-based intervention of suicide prevention. So we're focusing on community coalition building and enhanced capacities for outreach and support. Do you guys know what the Compact Act is? This is a tool and an act from 2022. Unfortunately, the previous administration did put the place so that we can incorporate a lot more veterans and engage them, especially in this acute suicidal crisis. This allows for an expansion to individuals who are not necessarily able to receive VA healthcare. They are able to receive VA paid outpatient and inpatient services, as well as the ambulance ride fare. It allows for emergency and mental health services at non-VA facilities. It allows for communication and coordination between VA and community providers, which does increase that timely intervention and follow-up care. If you have more questions in regards to it, then I would suggest contacting directly, since, again, Riverside County falls under VA Loma Linda. You can call VA Loma Linda's community care to get more information, especially how your agency or entity can engage, or if you have a veteran that used your services or needs to use your services, and you would like to make sure that they're not burdened financially due to their acute suicidal crisis, I would suggest you contacting them as well. Here are some more resources. We talked so much about the isolation that happens with veterans. They are lonely. Sometimes they self-isolate purposefully because they don't believe that we have the opportunity to help them. They, again, like Ray said, they think this person doesn't get me. They don't know what I've been through. But there are support groups for that the VA does have. Using the Veterans Crisis Line. You don't have to be in a crisis to use it. Mobile apps are amazing. Again, 988. When you call or text the mobile crisis line, you receive all care. So if you are in imminent danger or crisis, you will get the response necessary. If you text and you let them know that you're in a crisis or imminent danger, they will make sure that the same way they would do if you called 988 and spoke to a live operator, you would receive that in text message. Again, not everyone wants to travel to VA Loma Linda to receive care. These are some of the clinics that we do have in Riverside County specifically. We have 4: Marietta, Hemet, Corona, as well as Palm Desert. And another alternative to the VA entirely to receive counseling services is the vet centers. The vet centers allows veterans to have their marriage and family counseling as well as their self-counseling and not be notated in their VA record. Sometimes that is a concern for a lot of veterans is they're worried about what's in their record. So you can always suggest using the vet center. Again, they need their DD 214. Usually, they are combat veterans who do attend the vet center, or those who do suffer from PTSD, and it is free and no cost for them. Again, in Riverside County, we have the Temecula and Corona vet centers. We know Riverside County has the mobile crisis unit. If you don't want to call 988, you can always call the mobile crisis unit. These are some of the mental health urgent care walk-ins. And I want to thank you for attending this session, as well as my colleagues Alex Trujillo and Raymond Espinoza. This is our information if you are interested in collaborating or knowing more about us. Now I want to leave it to you guys. Do you guys have any questions? Feel free to take yourself off of mute or put it in the chat. And thank you again. I am Brianna Green, the Community Engagement Partnership Coordinator. I hope you guys all have an amazing day.
Thank you, Brianna, so much. And Alex and Raymond, thank you as well. Fabulous presentation. Who has questions?
I have a question. I'm Joska Chandrasena. I'm a vision specialist, and I live in the desert. This is such a valuable. This is such a valuable information to all of us. I myself, my daughter's married to a veteran, and this is something that I will work with. But I think our cities also need to take a responsibility of opening jobs for our veterans, and giving them a place from where they can launch. I think our cities have neglected this. And I would do everything in my power from today on to make it happen in my city, that we need to actually start a commission or a place, a hub where we can open city jobs to our veterans. I myself have a son-in-law who is has all these leadership skills, and we need to give them a platform to launch from, then give them like I know myself as a clinician have sent them to Walmart or to go to COD to start school again. But sometimes this is not the place where they want to start launch off from. We need to up our jobs and up our work and up our advocacy for this community.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Questions?
I mean, working with the cities is something that I know Alex and I are trying in our respective catchment areas to engage and educate, especially specifically when it comes to employment. Again, like we talked about before, a lot of the boxed veterans are warehouse, logistics, law enforcement, as well as security, because oh, you had a gun before in your hand, you'll be comfortable carrying a gun, but that's not necessarily what they want to do in their life. So I think it's also taking away those biases and educating so that we can limit that interaction.
Right.
Just to add to that a little bit, some cities do have programs in place. One of the top ones that I could think of is the city of Moreno Valley. Really pushes hiring veterans. They have programs in place where if an employer hires a veteran and employs them for a period, I believe it's of 6 months, the employer gets certain benefits from that. So there's definitely different things in place. It can vary depending on the city. I would say one of the biggest things you could do is get involved with a local chamber of commerce, and that's one of the best ways of pushing this information out there to other employers.
Yeah, on the employment side, I'm gonna piggyback on what Brianna said. And I think when we reach out to a lot of the providers, right, for employment, right, to gain meaningful employment, um, I would say from the times that I've engaged with certain providers as far as like trying to gain that employment, it was like, oh well, we can get you your security certification in 2 weeks, and you can have open, we get you your open carry, certification, so you can be armed security and do this and that. But again, I think that sometimes a veteran is capable of so much more, right? I understand that sometimes that's the easiest way or the fastest way to gain some form of employment, but I think if investing and giving the chance to a veteran, right, they can really accomplish anything, and having that support, so that we have veterans out here who are doctors, um, and all kinds of lawyers. They're um, helping them serve their community in a different way. So, don't be afraid as a provider to kind of provide something to the veteran that's not just security work, because even though like we are all somewhat trained to like, I must say to a very minimum in some sort of firearms, like not everybody wants to continue doing that.
Mhm. I have a fun story to tell you. In Palm Springs, we have a library right downtown, and one day I was at the library, and I'm the commissioner. I was the former human rights commissioner for the city of Palm Springs, and I was there, and there was this Japanese lady who came up to the door and wanted directions to Elvis's house, and none of us could speak Japanese. And we were kind of, using our hands and trying to direct them. There was this guy at a computer right behind, listening and watching. He was middle-aged. He came up, he came right in the front of the building, spoke perfect Japanese, and directed this lady, built a friendship, and sent her on her way. She was so happy to be able to find her way in Palm Springs. That is a model of work we need to create in our cities. We need interpreters. We have lots of veterans who come with so many skills of languages and being able to communicate and connect with people of different colors and races and stuff. And our cities need to jump on these opportunities and be creative.
You're right. That's why we're here to take that integrated approach into addressing the mental and social needs of our veterans. That's why we were here together, so that we can understand where we need our veterans to apply, to be a part of, to be supported at in our community and our familial space. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. What resources would you recommend to kids of veterans who may have trouble coping with intergenerational trauma? I'm also curious to know if there are peer groups that focus on cultural competence in VA behavioral health.
Well, I will address there are peer groups that focus on cultural competence within VA Health, especially VA Loma Linda. They do have a minority stress group, peer group, as well as Athena is a peer group, but they have so many support groups within different sections of their behavioral health, mental health, as well as suicide prevention. Um, I can provide you the peer line information so that you guys can talk to them. Resources about kids in trouble, I'm gonna leave that to Alex and Ray.
So for that one, I think Riverside County, I'm not too sure because I work Orange County, right? But maybe reaching out to them and they can point you in the right direction, because maybe they have something similar to that in Riverside County and they're more aware of that. But Strong Family, Strong Children, Mitzi Huff and Corey V. Hill are two of the individuals that are leading that charge, right? And they provide therapy for the kids of veterans, right? Because we understand that if something's not okay with us, then they get, because they're the ones living in our household, like they're the ones that get the firsthand experience as to, you know, those things that might affect them, because again, it's probably something that, their counterparts, who have parents who aren't veterans don't get to experience, right? Like, for me, my daughter, every time that we have to go out, right, like I have to do like a vehicle inspection, like, and it's not just like, hey, let's get in the car and go. It's like, hey, wait for me while I go do these things. And it's like, why does your dad do that? Right. And that's just as a basic example, right? And it can go to, different things where like, they might, hear their parents, having those nightmares and stuff like that. So it could get very traumatic for the kids, right? But they provide a safe space for the kids to talk about those things. So again, it's in Orange County, it's a Strong Family, Strong Children. Mitzi Health and Corey B. Hill will get you, connected, and I will reach out to them, and I'll get with Brianna, and then if there is a counterpart for Riverside County, I'll go ahead and provide her with that information so she can disseminate it to you guys.
Yeah, I think definitely don't hesitate to look beyond the VA for services for family members of veterans. Oftentimes there will be some sort of red tape that would prevent um, family members from getting services directly through the VA. However, there's oftentimes community partners that do receive funding to specifically work with veterans' families. Off the top of my head, I don't have any for Riverside County. I know right here in Redlands, which is close to where the Loma Linda VA is, there was Citrus Counseling Services, had a military program that was on a sliding scale. So even if you didn't have insurance, it was still accessible. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would say, I think oftentimes when it comes to getting any sort of help that's veteran related, the first thing somebody thinks of is it's got to be through the VA. But there's a lot of great programs out there that aren't through the VA. So don't hesitate to go through a community partner for any sort of family counseling services like that.
Thank you. And we have several knowledgeable people here in the room with us today. So in the chat, please check it out. Mayumi and Minette have added some information in there from Centerstone Military Services as well as the Dole Foundation.
Right.
Great. Other questions or comments?
I have a question. Well, not really more so a question. My name is Karan Andrews. I am a 13-year Navy veteran, also a filmmaker, TED Talk speaker, also 100% disabled veteran. I've dealt with a lot of the things that these guys have been dealing with now. I'm just trying to help out in the best way that I can. And one of the things that I've seen, basically, even with all there's so much resources now for veterans. There's a multitude of resources. Even the transition program has gotten better over the years, where they even like a boots to business program. But unfortunately for the veterans who served 10, 15, 20, 25 years, even though you provide a multitude of great resources, what you'll see sometimes, because they've been told what to do their entire life, they're not resourceful. So, in a sense, how do we start basically with the whole identity crisis? We have to start with the minds first, because the resources are there, but some people, they're just not resourceful because they've been told what to do their entire career. They have a shifted identity. They don't have a tribe anymore, and they feel a lack of purpose. So you show them the resources, but deep down inside, they're still having this existential crisis, or battling, fighting internal battles where resources that are in their face just might not help. Not taking away from the resources, they're great that they're there, but just based on what I'm seeing now, I'm seeing a lot of this a lot of the times. As a filmmaker, I'm currently working on a documentary to help veterans transition.
Terrific. Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, this is Mayumi. I'm so sorry. I can't get my video up to raise my hand or whatever it might be, but
That's okay.
I
Go
hope it's
ahead.
okay. But so I'm Mayumi. I'm also a veteran, so that's cool. And I'm also the owner of Warriors Inside Therapy. So we do PTSD and trauma for military veterans and families, including children. So that's a resource you don't have to use. This is not to be a commercial, but I will want say that as a woman veteran, when you discharge or we separate, one thing to remember too is we said it earlier, but there is this idea of when you walk into a place with your husband or your spouse, we often marry each other. I don't know what that's about, but when you walk in and everyone says thank you for your service or have you served, it's always directed at the man. It just is. It's a very typical. We get that. So just be careful and open to assume nothing and just ask the question to everybody kind of generally, right? The other piece of, we, excuse me, sometimes it's not always that we aren't aware of the resources, but often, I use the VA, I've used the vet center, I've worked at a vet center, all of those things, but sometimes we just don't want to use the VA. The women veterans have a little bit of, we have children. Do we want to bring the women in or children into the VA where it's surrounded by older men? Like that's the truth, right? So I think it's always important to have resources that are not necessarily always the VA. I think the VA is always the first stop. I always mention that. But to have some others in your pocket to just say, because it's not a comfortable feeling all the time. VA is doing much better to send a woman into the VA surrounded by men and everyone's just talking about whatever it is and they look at you like, trying to figure out is not always the most comfortable. So, I mean, and that's true for male veterans as well. Some of them just don't want to do the VA. Maybe they do know about it. So just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you for adding all these resources as well as Manette. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naomi.
Other questions or comments? Yes, we are going to compile this list of resources and be sure to send this out to you all in an email alongside the minutes from this meeting and the link to the video so that this can be revisited or you can share this meeting today with others that might be interested.
Mhm.
Any final questions or comments for our presenter and panelists? All right. Well, they want to thank you guys. If you'll stick around for a little while, perhaps a question will come up. And if it does, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do have some final bits of information we want to share with you all before we release you for the day. So give me just a moment to get my slides up. All right, we did our Q&A. Before I move on, did anybody come up with a question or a comment before we move into that? All right, so I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the opportunities we have here through the Riverside County Suicide Prevention Coalition. We do offer trainings, both in person and virtual, that are focused on suicide prevention. So Know the Signs is our 2-hour virtual training that talks about the basic signs and symptoms related to suicide, what to look for, and how to ask the question directly if someone's having thoughts of suicide. Safe Talk is approximately 4 hours an in-person training that talks about those invitations, signs, warning signs, how and asking directly in a little bit more detail, and looks a little bit at the stigma related to suicide. And then Assist, or Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, is a 2 full-day workshop that teaches all those same things. But when the answer is yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide, it also teaches attendees how to help develop a safety plan to keep someone safe for now and then connect them to more long-term resources. So you can find these trainings and more if you scan this QR code. It'll take you to our Google registration form, not only for these trainings, but for an additional series of mental health education and awareness trainings. We have our mental health first aid for both youth and adults, as well as a mental health 101, building resiliency and understanding trauma, as well as self-care and wellness. And if you have questions about any of that, there's our contact information and a way to get it. We'll be sure to send you these slides in that email as well. Also, heads up, save the date. Our next quarterly meeting will be on April 23rd. You can scan this QR code to get registered right away, and you'll receive a link for that meeting. So we are excited to bring you that. We are going to be talking about suicide prevention and interventions and strategies to support the African American community. So we hope that you'll join us and share that information with anyone else that you think might be interested. And so just again, please feel free to visit the rivcospc.org website, where you will find all the information that you need about not only the coalition, the subcommittees, as well as all the training information I just shared with you. Also, we want you to join the work. As we said, everyone has a role to play. This QR code will take you to our subcommittee sign-up page. So if you're interested in being a part of this work, we would love to have you join one of our subcommittees, so please check it out. And then finally, we'd love to hear from you and how you enjoyed today's presentation, as well as what you might want to hear from us in the future. So scan this QR code and please take just a few minutes. It's a very short survey. We do take it seriously. We read these things. We want to know if this has been beneficial to you, what you liked, what you didn't like, and what topics focused on suicide prevention you'd want to hear about in the future from the coalition. We want these meetings to be useful. We want them to really bring best practices and knowledge around suicide prevention to Riverside County, so that not only the subcommittee's work that's being done, but also all providers, all community members throughout our county have the knowledge to be able to support each other in our county and in our communities. So I'll leave that up there for a moment. And that is what I have for you today. Thank you all so much for being here. If there are any questions for our presenter or panelists, or for us here at the SPC, now would be a great time. So if there's any final comments, thank you so much. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.
Hey, Diana.
Yeah.
Good morning. It's Melanie. I wanted to know, because there's a lot of great resources here in the chat. I wanted to know, because I can't copy and paste from my laptop, is there a way that you'll be sending all these resources that everyone's inputting into the chat, one mass email?
Yes, we are going to get all of that information. We will put it in an email, and we'll send you an email after this that includes the slide deck, notes, as well as the link to this recording and all those resources.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, thank you all so much.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you guys? Hi. So for some reason I was trying to um just let you guys know that I really appreciate everything that you all do, and I'm really thankful for you guys. So yeah, I tried to put it in the chat, but for some reason it wouldn't go through. So I just wanted to say that before I logged off. Just thank you, and for all the resources and just more insight, because again, I went through when I first got out of the service. It was really hard for me, and I felt like I was kind of belittled in a sense, and nobody took what I was going through seriously until I got with some veterans from the Veterans Resource Center, Cal State Fullerton, Fullerton CC, as well as I ended up having to go to what is it called? The Patient Care Advocate at Loma Linda because I felt like even the staff at Loma Linda University, not all, but some weren't taking me serious. And it wasn't until I got with them that they really pointed me in the right direction and pretty much changed the trajectory of my life after the military, and which is why I'm in right now to be a veteran social worker in my master's right now because of the guidance and because of people like you. So I just wanted to thank you all.
Well, thank you, Robert, and I'm glad to hear that you got what you needed and you're doing so well. We were glad to have you here today, and we'd love to have you be a part of our coalition. So if any of this interested you, get in touch with us. We'd love to work with you.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, that's it. Thank you, interpreters. Awesome job.
I got all the resources already.
Perfect. I wanted to make sure we had that before I shut down the meeting.
Mhm.
All right, you guys, I'm going to close it up.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.